fight for religious freedom. The legal battle mounting against President Trump after he rolls back Obamacare's contraceptive mandate. Twitter controversy.
I fought Planned Parenthood and we stopped the sale of baby body parts.
A lawmaker from Tennessee is speaking out after she says the social media platform yanked her pro-life political ad. California inferno.
And they were screaming, fire, 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 get out.
More firefighters deployed to areas devastated by wildfires raging across the state. And papal trip. The Vatican reveals details about the Holy Father's visit to Myanmar and Bangladesh later this year. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 10th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A legal battle is mounting against President Trump after his rollback of the Health and Human Services contraceptive mandate. The new policy allows more employers to opt out of covering birth control to employees at no cost for religious or moral objections. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Washington State is the latest to sue the president over last week's decision. It joins California and Massachusetts, as well as the American Civil Liberties Union. But Catholic leaders are praising the action, and they see relief in sight for Catholic institutions across the country.
We are so grateful that the Trump administration took this step to really restore religious freedom in our country.
Catholic bishops are calling the administration's move a return to common sense.
For 200 years, we did not have a requirement that contraceptives be covered with no cost at all to women, and we would never have enforced that on religious employers with deeply held religious beliefs about contraceptives, abortion-inducing drugs and devices, and sterilization.
But Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson is suing the president. He says the rollback of the contraceptive mandate violates the First Amendment. President Trump's contraception rules are unfair, unlawful, and unconstitutional. California and Massachusetts have filed lawsuits, and the American Civil Liberties Union is suing on behalf of a hospital workers union. But White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says the new rules are legal.
The president believes that the freedom to practice one's faith is a fundamental right in this country, and I think all of us do. And that's all that today was about. Our federal government should always protect that right.
Hillary Burns says the American bishops are hopeful the rollback will prompt the Department of Justice to provide relief to groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor, the religious order that serves the elderly poor who've been fighting the mandate in court for years.
We hope that the cases that are still pending in federal courts around the country are now going to be settled on favorable terms for those who brought the cases, so the Little Sisters and so many Catholic and other religious ministries around the country.
EWTN is one of those religious ministries. Our network filed a lawsuit in 2012 and has been fighting the mandate for more than 5 years. Michael Warsaw, our chairman of the board and CEO, said in a statement that EWTN is carefully considering the new exemptions, but is optimistic that they will be a step forward toward victory. Wyatt?
Mark, it's been about 10 days since Tom Price resigned as the head of Health and Human Services Secretary. Do we know who the president will nominate next?
According to media reports, there are 2 names on the President Trump's list of contenders: former Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal and former Senator Rick Santorum. Both are Catholics known for their strong pro-life views.
And we'll be watching for that. Correspondent Mark Irons from the White House. Thanks so much. President Trump says he has confidence in his Secretary of State despite recent reports of infighting. Trump told reporters today during an Oval Office meeting with Henry Kissinger that he didn't undercut Rex Tillerson. But in an interview with Forbes magazine, the president challenged Tillerson to an IQ test. The White House says Trump was just joking. President Trump suggests a change to tax law to punish organizations that don't respect the flag or national anthem. Trump tweeted, "Why is the NFL getting massive tax breaks while at the same time disrespecting our anthem, flag, and country? Change tax law." The president's proposal actually wouldn't affect the NFL since it gave up its tax-exempt status a couple years ago. Twitter blocks a pro-life lawmaker's views on abortion. It comes as Congressman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee launches her campaign to replace retiring Republican Senator Bob Corker. She says she's appalled and that the whole pro-life community deserves an apology. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi tells us why this issue is bigger than just one Senate race. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. Twitter says it's not allowing Representative Blackburn's paid ad because her choice of words about Planned Parenthood is inflammatory. Other pro-life leaders tell me they've run into the same Twitter trouble.
Tennessee Republican Marsha Blackburn says Twitter censors this ad.
I'm 100% pro-life. I fought Planned Parenthood and we stopped the sale of baby body parts.
Twitter says Congressman Blackburn needs to cut that line if she wants to advertise. In an email the Blackburn campaign shared with News Nightly, a Twitter rep says the words, "Stop the sale of baby body parts" has been deemed an inflammatory statement that is likely to evoke a strong negative reaction. That means Blackburn cannot pay Twitter to promote the video.
That's all right, bring it on.
But she's not the only one.
The promoted tweet tool is meant to expand your audience outside of the typical rank and file. And we're educating pro-life people, but we also want to educate people that just don't regularly get this message.
Pro-life lobby group, the Susan B. Anthony List, tells me one of their ads also got them into trouble on Twitter.
Herring's backers even want partial birth abortion, barbarically killing babies as they're being delivered.
Communications Director Mallory Quigley says they cannot promote the ad on Twitter, which hurts their nationwide push to elect pro-life lawmakers.
This is very concerning for our ability as a movement to grow our ranks and to really expose the brutal nature of abortion. I mean, the thing itself is what offends people, and we're just trying to talk about what it is and why we ought to change the law.
Back to Blackburn, the majority of Tennessee residents agree with her pro-life position. According to one 2017 poll from Middle Tennessee State University, they find 56% of Tennessee voters think abortion should be outlawed in most or all cases. So Wyatt Blackburn's pro-life message could help get her elected here to the U.S. Senate.
And Jason, does Twitter have any further response to this situation?
They haven't responded to me, but I did review one email from Twitter to the Susan B. Anthony List. In it, the Twitter employee says the words "killing babies" could be inflammatory for users who can't immediately choose what ads they see. Twitter says it's not censoring anything. The videos can stay online. They can stay on Twitter. They're just not up as paid ads.
Interesting. Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. Pope Francis will wade into religious and political minefield of Myanmar's crackdown on Rohingya Muslims and the effects of their exodus to Bangladesh when he visits both countries next month. Today, the Vatican released the itinerary for the trip in late November, early December. Juliette Lindley is EWTN News Nightly's Vatican correspondent. She joins us now from Rome with more on this trip. Juliette, why has Pope Francis chosen these two countries in particular?
Now, Wyatt, this trip's motto is peace and love among people of different faiths. And these are two countries with very small Catholic populations. In Myanmar, which is predominantly Buddhist, Catholics make up 1% of the population, and in Muslim-majority Bangladesh, Catholics make up a mere 0.2%. So Vatican insiders say the Pope has chosen these countries precisely because they're on the peripheries. And Pope Francis has said he wants to take the message of the gospel to those peripheries. It's been a priority of his from the beginning of his pontificate. And the two countries are also very close to India and China, two nations which analysts say would make highly symbolic destinations for future papal trips.
Sure, and it makes sense from a spiritual and spreading the gospel point of view here, but what do you think are the political implications of the Holy Father's visit?
Well, while this is a pastoral trip, there is no doubt that the focus will likely be on the plight of the Rohingya people, in whose defense the Pope has spoken out repeatedly. They're a Muslim minority in Buddhist majority Myanmar and have come under attack by security forces, and they've been flooding into neighboring Bangladesh by the hundreds of thousands, causing a major humanitarian crisis. Now, the government offensive has drawn international condemnation and with UN accusations of ethnic cleansing, which the government denies. The itinerary makes no mention of a papal meeting with Rohingya in either country, but Pope Francis is likely to refer to their plight, and he has repeatedly denounced the persecution of what he calls our Rohingya brothers. Now, both nations regard the Rohingya as citizens of the other country.
And it only makes sense that Pope Francis would speak for the marginalized. Juliette, what will be the highlights of the trip?
Now, Pope Francis will meet Myanmar's civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, as well as the country's military generals and top Buddhist monks. The meeting with Suu Kyi is expected to be private, whereas the military leaders are expected to attend a separate public meeting where Vatican observers say they expect Pope Francis to make a keynote speech. Now, he is also scheduled to say 2 masses in Myanmar and 1 in Bangladesh.
Very interesting. We'll continue to follow all of the information on the Pope's upcoming visit. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Prosecutors suggest a 3-year prison sentence for the former head of the Vatican Children's Hospital. Giuseppe Profiti is accused of embezzling donations and using the money to renovate a cardinal's apartment. A second suspect, the hospital's treasurer, may be exonerated since prosecutors say they don't have enough evidence. Verdicts could come as early as Saturday when the trial resumes. 1,600 Boko Haram suspects go on trial in Nigeria, the largest mass trial in the group's history. The Islamic extremists are accused of killing more than 20,000 people over an 8-year period. Lawyers worry the suspects won't get a fair trial. It's being held behind closed doors. People in Liberia vote to replace Africa's first female leader. The election represents the first time in more than 70 years the country has transferred power from one democratically elected government to another. 20 presidential candidates are on the ballot. The top finishers will likely face a runoff election in November. The president of the Catalan region in Spain says he has a mandate to declare independence, but he's proposing waiting a few weeks in order to facilitate dialogue. Critics call the Catalonia independence movement a coup that has no support in Europe. Iran is warning the United States against undermining the 2015 nuclear deal.
I would like to make solid clear that we do not want to see the deal unravel.
The head of Iran's nuclear agency says a failure of the nuclear deal would undermine the United States' credibility. President Trump is set to deliver a speech on Iran this week. He doesn't think Iran is complying with the landmark 2015 agreement, so he's not expected to certify it. Joining us now is Blaise Mishtal, Director of National Security at the Bipartisan Policy Center. So Blaise, first off, remind us of the 2015 deal. What exactly was it?
Sure. So for the United States, there's one main component of this deal, which is the requirement to lift certain nuclear-related sanctions from Iran for the duration of the deal. For Iran, there's really 2 main components. The first is certain restrictions on Iran's nuclear program, so how many centrifuges it can have, how much uranium it can enrich, how many nuclear reactors it can have. And those restrictions, and this is very important, fade away over time, so that 15 years from now, most of those restrictions go away. And the other component for Iran is greater inspections by international inspectors, and that component is permanent.
Yeah, both issues seem to be an issue for the president. What do you think he'll say in his speech this week, or can we even predict, do you think?
I mean, I think he's made it very clear that he does not like the deal. He called it the worst and most one-sided deal ever in a recent speech. And I think he's been very clear that he wants to decertify the deal, to say that it's not working for the United States anymore. The question is, will he go beyond that and actually withdraw the United States from this agreement? And that we don't know yet.
Right. So President Trump, though, is facing a deadline. He has until October 15th to tell Congress if he believes Iran is complying with that pact and if it advances U.S. interests. What are his options here?
Right. Well, he has a couple of options, and the first one is about how he goes about decertification. So under the legislation that created this entire certification process, there's 4 criteria. There's Iran's implementation of the deal, whether it is in compliance with the deal, whether it is trying to create a nuclear weapon, and whether the deal is in the national security interests of the United States. He could choose to decertify on any one or all 4 of those. So how he goes about it is one thing. And the next question is, what are the follow-on steps? Will he call for new sanctions? Will he call for reimposition of the old sanctions on Iran? Or will he just try to open it up for negotiations with Iran to improve the deal?
A lot of things he could do. What do you think is the best way he should handle the situation?
Well, I think given that it's clear that he's decertifying the deal, I think it's important that he couch that in a broader strategy, because our concerns with Iran go well beyond the nuclear program. And I think if he addresses not just the nuclear deal, but he addresses the support for terrorism, the oppression and abuse of human rights at home, the threatening moves that are being made against our allies like Israel or Saudi Arabia, Iran's role in fueling the conflict in Syria and Iraq, those are things that our allies in Europe and the Middle East can get behind. And it will give him a much broader strategy with a lot more international support to try to achieve his objectives.
Okay, we'll be watching to see what happens this week. Blaise Mishtal, Director of National Security at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you, Wyatt.
Coming up, fleeing flames.
Trying to get out of here. We saw it, now it's getting across the road. It's all bad.
Californians race to escape deadly wildfires. And an update on an American pastor jailed in Turkey. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Thousands of people are without power in California tonight as deadly wildfires ravage parts of the state, killing at least 13 in Northern California alone.
All we could see was glowing red everywhere. Very scary because you didn't really know what direction it was from.
Thousands of Napa, Mendocino, and Sonoma County residents flee the uncontrollable, deadly wildfires raging across parts of California.
Went out and they were screaming, fire, 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 get out, get out.
Thousands of homes and buildings helplessly burned to the ground.
Sad. My house is okay. All of my neighbors aren't. I just don't know where to go from here.
These rapidly burning fires are being fueled by wind and dry conditions, causing widespread devastation as entire neighborhoods are wiped out in Santa Rosa.
Most of these fires have limited or no containment. These are very rapidly burning fires.
It's an apocalyptic scene as residents describe the confusion while trying to evacuate.
There's fires everywhere. I've been sent in 3 different directions to evacuate horses. I'm receiving horses. I'm going to do everything I can.
Yeah, trying to get out of here. We saw it, now it's getting across the road. It's all bad.
And the winds are expected to ease up tonight, giving firefighters a welcome break from the weather, but not from the fires. A federal judge in Wisconsin strikes down one of the biggest tax breaks for clergy across the country. The judge says the housing allowance tax break that's been around since 1954 is unconstitutional. The tax break will stay in place while the case continues in court. The U.S. has suspended issuing of visas for Turkish citizens hoping to visit or study in the United States. This after Turkey arrested a U.S. consulate employee on allegations of espionage. The move comes as another American citizen sits in a Turkish jail. Pastor Andrew Brunson is being held on terror-related charges. Brunson has lived in Turkey for over 20 years, ministering to Christians. Joining us now is Christina Arriaga, Vice Chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. That's a bipartisan federal commission dedicated to protecting religious freedom. Christina, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
You just got back from Turkey and you visited with Pastor Brunson, who's been in jail for a year now. How's he doing?
Well, he's under a lot of pressure. My colleague, Sandy Jolly, and I drove to this remote prison outside of Izmir, Kiriklir. It's close to where Ephesus is. And we visited with him. He had not been allowed to see anyone but his wife and lawyer. He's lost 50 pounds, and he's showing a lot of signs of the stress that he's under. He was initially confined to a cell meant for 21 people, actually meant for 8 people with 21 people. Now he's in a cell meant for 3 people with 2 other roommates. So he is in less crowded conditions, but under a lot of pressure. There are no Christians in that prison, and there's no one who speaks English in that prison either.
Okay, so bring us up to date with his case. Where does it stand now, and what can the U.S. government do to help him?
Well, the Turkish government has fabricated charges against him. They have not told him or his attorney exactly what the charges are. They're playing this in the media. They're relying supposedly on secret testimony of secret witnesses that the pastor himself has not been able to read any of the documents that have been filed against him. And the U.S. government, both the president and the vice president, have called out for his release. But unfortunately, that hasn't yielded any results.
Wow. So while in Turkey, you were also meeting with the Little Sisters of the Poor in Istanbul. Tell us in general about the religious climate, and especially for Catholic and Catholic groups right now in Turkey.
Yes, our USERV delegation met with many religious leaders, and we visited the Home of Little Sisters. We also visited with Franciscan friars and with other Catholic orders that are ministering to refugees, to children that have no place else to go. Turkey underwent a coup attempt 18 months ago. There is unfortunately a state of emergency. A lot of people are getting arrested. A lot of people are under a lot of pressure. These religious people go out and minister every single day, regardless of the outside pressures that they may be facing right now.
It's pretty incredible how they're able to have that faith. Tomorrow, you'll be testifying before Congress about the role the U.S. government plays in protecting religious freedom abroad. Tell us, what do you think your message is going to be?
Well, the message is going to be that religious freedom is a vital core right, and that our own national security depends on us fostering religious freedom abroad. And that is a message that it's important for Congress to hear, because they have tools that they can implement, such as the Magnitsky Act, which means that anyone who's torturing Christians abroad or torturing any other religious people abroad should not be able to come to New York and go shopping for Christmas. And members of Congress certainly can keep a list and forbid those people from being issued visas to come to this country as a reward for what? Their human rights violations?
Wow, pretty incredible, but a pretty important issue as well. Christina Arriaga, Vice Chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Up next, The Light of Christ. We'll tell you about a new book that tackles tough theological truths. And The Lord of Miracles. Thousands of Catholics in Lima, Peru take to the streets. We'll tell you why. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A controversial gender identity bill passes in Greece. It allows people to easily change their gender listed on their IDs and official documents. Until now, those seeking a new identity had to prove they had undergone sex change surgery and psychiatric assessment. Two men in Berlin have become the first gay couple to adopt a child in Germany. The couple was also among the first to wed after Germany approved same-sex weddings October 1st. The CIA World Factbook says 29% of Germans are Roman Catholics, which is a higher percentage than any other faith group in the country. A new book is helping regular folks break down some complex concepts in Catholic theology. The Light of Christ, an introduction to Catholicism, is grounded in traditional theology, but it addresses current-day issues and questions facing the Church. Joining us now is Father Thomas Joseph White, author of the book. So, Father, tell us what inspired you to write this book in the first place.
Well, Wyatt, I live in Washington, D.C., and I work with young adults interested in Catholicism. Often they're agnostic, or they're seeking, they're spiritual but not religious, or they're maybe from a Protestant background or some other religious tradition. And they're interested in the claims of the Catholic Church, whether the faith is reasonable, and they have often a lot of the sort of secular queries or questions of people of our time.
So what are some of the main themes?
Well, often you would have a question like, is it reasonable to believe in any religious authority? Can we trust a claim to divine revelation at all? Is the historical Jesus who the Church says he is? Can we trust the New Testament and the dogma of the Church? Is modern science compatible with the faith? Can traditional Catholicism be harmonized with the teachings of modern science? And does Catholic moral teaching lead us to happiness, or is it oppressive? Is it a source of fulfillment, or is it really kind of a source of illusion? So very frank questions like that. And those themes are in this book, where I try to take the questions very seriously and answer them while presenting the traditional Catholic faith to people and explaining it, presupposing very little exposure previously to theology.
Sure, sometimes answering those frank questions can be so worthwhile. In the book you write, and I want to read this quote here because it's interesting, the idea of leaving our intellect behind to become spiritual is a very strange and inhuman. However, it is a view that is very widespread. The vulgar commonplace form is the saying, I'm spiritual but not religious. Well, we hear that one all the time. What exactly do you mean by that quote?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of people think that we approach God through a kind of blind act of faith in a religious tradition or in customs or rituals, but that we don't analyze religious truth claims as giving us an explanation of reality. And actually, Thomas Aquinas teaches you cannot love what you don't first know. And so it's actually in trying to understand God and the world realistically that we come to know God and love God, and that the will follows the mind in a certain sense. And a lot of the claims of our contemporaries to say that it's perhaps best to be spiritual but not religious are grounded in a fear of you might say, the determinations of dogma and ritual, that if I get into one tradition's teaching and rituals, I'm limiting myself, I'm narrowing myself. But actually, in some ways, these are disciplines of the soul which go hand in hand with trying to clarify what it means to be spiritual, to try to find the truth about our spiritual life, to find the truth about how to approach God with other people.
Such important topics and such an important book in this day and age. Father Thomas Joseph White, author of The Light of Christ, an Introduction to Catholicism. Thanks so much.
Thank you, White.
Finally tonight, thousands of Catholics in Peru take to the streets to show their devotion. Peruvians pray for peace and understanding during a special procession honoring Jesus known as the Lord of Miracles. At least 30 men carried the 2-ton shrine with a mural of the image called the Black Christ because of his dark skin. An Angolan slave painted the mural in the 17th century. Miraculously, it survived multiple earthquakes over the course of several hundred years. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.